All right, everyone. Trump has come out and said it, which is that Sleepy Joe Biden, which is a stand-in for Creepy Joe, he didn't want the controversy. He just wanted to dog whistle. That was 4D chess. It definitely was. He's calling Biden weak. And the thing is, this makes sense because the leftists are saying the same thing. Trump, ironically, in this is on the same side as the progressives. That's really the biggest thing that people on the left have said about Biden is that he can't win. Because electability is the all-encompassing issue right now for people in the Democratic Party. They want to get rid of Trump and have a Democrat in there. The thing is that about 25-30% of the party believes Biden is the only one there who's viable. Name recognition, dynastic politician, would have significant backing from Obama that would be of some import. They look at much of the rest of the field, and they see people who may be sane but have no recognition, a Buttigieg, a Hickenlooper, and then they see a bunch of wackos. They see a bunch of far leftists crowding the field. The fact is that with so many people on the far left crowding the field, they're strangulating one another. It's impossible for any of them to achieve Biden numbers. So in order for there to be a pathway to victory for any of Biden's opponents, Sanders, Harris, Warren, those are the big three, they would have to single-mindedly focus on maybe Iowa and New Hampshire and try to knock Biden out by taking the electability issue and inverting it so that the people supporting Biden, who only care about electability for the most part, flee from him to another platform. And it's a risky move because it may not work. And it would leave them with anemic support in latter states. Biden could come back simply by design, grab up South Carolina, grab up Nevada, sweep Super Tuesday, and be nominated anyway on the power of that. Although that would deviate to almost always. I think, what was the last time that a person lost both Iowa and New Hampshire and became the nominee for either party? I think it was before the 70s, if I remember from last election, they were talking about that. Basically, anyone who gets those first two states, they go on to be the nominee. I think that Biden has a good chance. Biden's main problem is overriding Sanders in Iowa. If Biden grabs up Iowa, he becomes probably the nominee. That could give him enough steam to steal New Hampshire from Sanders, and even if not, Sanders is going to have trouble in South Carolina. If it comes down to the electability issue and it looks like there are only two men left standing, I would expect Biden to have 3 of the first 4. New Hampshire is a no-brainer for Sanders anyway, and people will be saying, look, Biden got all 3 of the major states, minus New Hampshire, which was heavily tilted. It's the twin state of Vermont, so it's heavily tilted towards Sanders. It's clear who's electable here. Super Tuesday comes around, I think, a week later. It goes straight Biden probably at that point. You might see a couple of states defect, but it'd be, in effect, the race would be over. But Biden is a weak candidate. Here's the problem, though. Here's the problem, and Trump probably understands this and is laughing at it. Biden may be a weak candidate, but most of the alternatives are weaker. Not necessarily less, I mean, certainly some of them are more well-spoken. Buttigieg is more well-spoken and less gaffe-prone than Biden is, while having a tolerably moderate platform by Democratic Party standards. The problem with him, he's too young. He's at the Gabbard age range. And even though I consider him more potentially electable, I deviate from the Democratic core. Most of them want Biden. They think he's more electable. They look at Buttigieg and say he doesn't have enough name recognition. Not enough name recognition, and maybe that thing where he said, well, Trump is bad for the LGBT people. When, he was paid a compliment by Trump saying, yeah, I have no problem. I think it's beautiful that Buttigieg is married. In a gay marriage. I don't have a problem with that. And he sort of, gave him the cold shoulder stuff. That looked a little bit mean. And the thing is, he's not Trump, so he can't get away with being mean-looking as much. The Democrats would be hypocrites. They've had a huge problem with Trump's attitude alone. Buttigieg cocking the same sort of thing is not going to be good for him in his campaign. And he's stalled out around 5 to 6% anyway. He's still in 4th or 5th place, depending on the day and depending on the polling firm, behind or just ahead of O'Rourke. So it's a little bit of a problem. He's not in the top 3. Really, the top 3 are the viable ones. At this point, it's Biden way out in front, Sanders as the second wheel, and then either Warren or Harris at roughly 10% on a good day. And way behind and sort of just rounding out, the top of the bottom, so to speak. Biden has nothing to worry about, and he'll probably be the nominee. But he is a weak potential candidate. The thing is, I mean, if he manages to be nominated, it might be all over for the Democrats as far as the election goes. Because on day one, what'll happen is that there'll be uproar among the leftists in the party, and they'll seek to punish the Democrats. And they'll work themselves up into a frenzy, and a lot of them will never fall back in line. I could see a permanent schism within the Democratic Party for an entire political paradigm. We're talking like a 20, 30-year span. Yes, that could happen. Or the pragmatists could come roaring back if they lose and say, look, now you've had your field day, we're taking back our party, we're going to be the party of JFK, and we're going to stop, going so far left, because it's obvious people are rejecting that message. That would require intelligence that I don't think of Tom Perez or Nancy Pelosi have, but there are some reformist-minded people in the party. Get Jim Webb to be the head of the DNC, you'll go places for once. But Trump is right. The leftists are right too. Yeah, I agree with Bernie Sanders fans. Biden is exceptionally weak. The problem is that he's the least weak of the field other than people who are not viable. If I had to tell you, I'll give you the top 5 people in the Democratic field in order that I think would do the best against Trump. Keeping in mind I would still favor Trump to win, simply because of good economic news, no major wars, hopefully that stays that way, a la Iran and other places, no major wars, and the fact that the Democrats are schismatic. So keeping those 3 things in mind, and that Trump has the incumbent advantage as well, and a tailwind pushing him ahead potentially once there is a nominee to actually run against, keeping that in mind, here would be the top 5. Number 1, and this is vastly unpopular, judging not just based on his polls, Julian Castro. Because he's not quite as young as a Gabbard or Buttigieg. He's in his early 40s. He's a little bit more viable due to that. He doesn't have a huge amount of experience, but neither did Obama, and he looks and acts a lot like Obama. He would be the kind of candidate, the kind of person who could schmooze his way into the sweet spot between the business Dems and the leftists and strike, I think, the right tone. The problem? He will not be the nominee. He doesn't even break 1% in the polls because he's been ignored. Number 2, I would say Tulsi Gabbard. Again, a little bit, the youth is definitely, like with Buttigieg, a problem for some of these candidates. She's arguably, if you're under 40, you're arguably too young, because then there will be business Dems like, well, this person's untested and stuff, but she's got the military background, she's got the look, so to speak, and she is well-spoken. She's not your grandpa's Democrat. She's different, and I think could actually do well. She would actually have a chance of winning, which should scare you that someone that's not even going to be 40 on election day could be the next president of the United States. But I think she'd do better, arguably, than most of the others. Number 3, I'd say Buttigieg. Definitely. Again, though, the youth could be a problem. He's 38. Again, he'd be 40 on election day. I think he's exactly the same age as Gabbard, actually, which is pretty funny. In his case, his main strengths are, again, he's capable of striking that slightly more moderate tone so as not to alarm too many business Dems. That gives him more clout in the Rust Belt. But at the same time, the youth and the fact that he's willing to do the orange man bad thing, the Trump derangement thing, plays up to the far left without giving them an actual leftist platform. So other than AOC's people, he wouldn't have a problem. He'd have no problem with the pink-haired, dedicated SJWs, I think. Number 4 would be Biden. Again, the fact that Biden would be in the top 5 should alarm the Democrats, but that speaks for itself. And number 5 would be Gillibrand. Yeah, Kirsten Gillibrand is still technically viable, but she's made several mistakes, and again, she's a blip on the radar. Of the top 5 there that I judge would be the most electable, only 2 of them are actually in the top 5 polling-wise. Buttigieg is probably he's arguably in 5th place, sometimes in 4th. That's outside of electability. It's been too long. The thing is, the top candidates, Biden, Sanders, Warren, and Harris, have large infrastructure. They've got endorsements. They've got money coming in. Does Buttigieg? Does Beto O'Rourke? No. They've been completely forsaken. The longer that they're not in that top rung, the more endorsements and the more potential sponsors flee to other candidates because of the electability issue being so great. With Biden in a clear lead, he's sucking up most of the money. He will extend his capabilities further towards Iowa, towards New Hampshire, past them to Super Tuesday. But Biden is a weak candidate. I would put him in the top 5. He's in the top quarter for potential electability. But that doesn't really mean anything at this point. It doesn't mean anything. They're fighting against insurmountable odds, and they don't even realize it. They think that Trump is weak. But inside the DNC, you can see their nervousness. The way in which the DNC has been acting, the way in which the Democratic core, the corporate core, the Pelosi's and Clintons are acting towards people on the left within the party, shows them to be terrified. They're basically settling for Biden. They don't see any other viable candidates, and they really want to knock Trump out. They know that Bernie Sanders is not capable of waging the kind of campaign he will need. I hate to tell this to the 15-20% of Democrats that are really strongly behind Bernie, it seems. but he is not electable. He is a self-avowed socialist who is pushing 80 years old, and he represents an older, much whiter, more male demographic within the Democratic Party. Thinking 10 years ago he couldn't even be a Democrat. He was an independent specifically because the Dems wouldn't have him. They wouldn't have him because they didn't want to be directly associated with fringe mentality. The fact that Sanders is now no longer considered particularly fringe belies the fundamental issue, the schismatic problem within the Democratic Party. The Republicans began suffering with similar problems of yesteryear. They solved theirs. They found a fusion platform that coalesced the party around Trump's populistic message. It worked. They reformed. You don't have to like what they stand for now, although I think less warmongering. They don't care if you're gay. They've sort of pulled back on some of these issues, and they're mainly a money party now. I think it's better. I think it's like a pre-Reagan Republican platform. But yeah, I think it's refreshing. I think it's better than what they've had for multiple decades, since Ronald Reagan turned them into a neocon warmongering puppet party. I think it's better. The Democrats need to do the same. Become the party of JFK, and then I'll consider voting for you. But if your main message is you don't like me because of the color of my skin, you want to take more of my money, and orange man bad, that's not the kind of platform that I can get behind. It's never going to happen. I will not be able to vote for you in good conscience because I think you're being run by lunatics. I don't want lunatics running the country. Trump's already running it, and he seems to be doing an okay job. That's why I thought that we would be in a Great Depression in World War III right now, but things seem to be going okay. That's about all. Peace out.